Myron always say, humans only do something for one reason and one reason only, because they feel like it.
That's true.
And it's very, very true. Like,
well, I think it's true like 90% of the time. I do think there is C.S. Lewis. We'll get to baby turkeys, baby turkeys too. Yeah, mother turkeys. But I like that you said that, because that's something I always kind of disagreed with Myron about.
Okay, cool.
I agree with it on the broad scale.
Sure.
But
it's directionally true.
It's directionally correct. It's directionally and predictably accurate, but it's not ironclad in this sense.
Okay.
So C.S. Lewis in the book Mere Christianity, he talks about how that the whole book is basically his walk into Christianity.
Yeah.
It wasn't originally a book. It was originally a series of articles, and so
then
he puts it together. But he doesn't go straight to trying to prove Jesus as a creator.
Right.
He starts with the very first chapter, the very first page says, everyone, let's take an example. Someone goes into Starbucks. He doesn't use Starbucks. I'm going to use Starbucks today.
I don't think Starbucks was around.
And he says someone's there, and then all of a sudden, someone comes and cuts line. And they say, hey, you shouldn't do that, right? Hey, you gave me a bit of I gave you a bit of my orange. You need to give me a bit of your grapefruit.
Right.
Everyone acts and talks and assumes that there is an objective moral standard.
There's a baseline.
There's a baseline of morality and ethics that everyone presupposes. Now, some people can argue about specifics of it, but even if someone says, hey, you shouldn't do that, the other person doesn't be like, to hell with your standard. They don't usually do that.
Not typically.
Usually what they do is they say, well, that really doesn't apply because blank.
Right.
Like they justify it through a direction.
Sure.
So
that's in alignment with their moral compass.
In alignment with their moral compass.
And they're basically saying, hey, I hear your moral standard. Here's why I did it, because this is my moral standard.
Well, and
potentially,
and even deeper, they're really arguing that they didn't break the actual standard in the first place.
Right.
There is a shift, and here's the reason why that particular normal moral standard ought not apply in this situation. Right. What he ends up doing is saying, okay, so there is an ought there. C.S. Lewis talks about that. And he says, okay, well then once everyone agrees that everyone is operating under the assumption that there is an ought, then there's an ought giver, so to speak, right? There's a transcendent ought.
Yeah.
And that transcendent ought is what everyone is appealing to, albeit maybe vague or not exact, but everyone's arguing for that, no matter where you're at. He then said, now you could argue, in C.S. Lewis, he says that moral argument is mainly as a perseverance of the species. Like, okay, well, through biological processes, our biology, our physiology has learned that these are the morals that further the species.
Correct.
Okay. He said, but, let's say, for example, because, the biological argument or the evolutionary argument is that people are mainly driven by procreation at the foundational level. Freud was big on that.
Yeah.
And he said, everything comes back down to genetics being spread.
Yeah.
Okay. And all of our behaviors are mere seeming complicated versions of that as a derivative. Okay, so the craziest thing is this. He says, okay, so let's say there's someone drowning. They're drowning in the water. Someone's drowning in the water, and you're walking by. Okay, and then you're sitting there. Well, there's a deliberation that happens in your mind. Do I jump out into the ice water to try to rescue this person, very well endangering myself?
Yep.
Or do I stay on the beach and preserve my life and my ability to procreate? Okay? Because one is for the other, one is for yourself. He said, then you have this split of it's good to stay alive and it's good to save someone. Right? Or you could switch it even to a better example, is like there's a person being attacked by a shark, right? Do you run out there and try to save the person or not, right? Like that's a big one, right?
Yeah.
But like you could save them, right? You know, you're on knee deep water, you know, you like grab them, pull.
Like the old dude that wrangled the gator and saved his dog.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, down in Florida.
I remember that.
With a cigar in his mouth, never dropped a cigar, just went in, just pulled the gator off.
I totally remember that.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. So so then he said the crazy thing is so the obvious genetic answer is you save yourself.
Sure.
Because you could have more children and that's not your gene pool over there.
Right.
Okay, but there's something hanging into you that's there, that's present, that's saying, hey, you ought go save this person.
Right.
Right? You ought. And there's that ought word again. Ought. And the crazy thing is, he said, so then what is the thing that judges between the two? What? Because you're going to have these two motivations. Motivation for self-preservation, motivation for helping your neighbor. So what arbitrates that? And he uses this, he says, because most of the time that voice is not the thing you want to do or even feel like doing, right? Like the voice of what you ought do is not what you feel like doing in the moment.
For sure.
And I think that was my kicker. Like if you peel back the layers of human psychology, because every motivation that's like that, you know, like let's say there's an unmarried couple, right? Or let's say there's a young man and he's watching bad things that he shouldn't watch on social, you know, some website or something, right? And he's a believer and he knows he ought not.
Yeah.
So it feels better to, or he feels like he wants to, right? But then there's an ought. So if he chooses the ought, then he's choosing what doesn't feel the best.
Right.
Right? And I think that's my only argument with that.
Sure.
But that is that spirit-flesh wrestling.
Oh, 100%.
I think. But so I agree with it on whole that people
well, on an impulsive level,
100%.
On an impulsive level, the feelings are there, and on non-critical, crazy things like saving people from freezing water or sharks, obviously, I don't feel like jumping into cold water. But I think part of his point though was also when you can train yourself to feel like doing the things.
Oh, that part, yes.
Then look out, right? Because you can get to a point where basically it becomes part of your identity, right? It becomes part of you to where I feel like doing it. I feel like whatever.
Oh, you know, from a sales perspective and a persuasion standpoint, operating off that principle, that's what makes Myron such a good salesperson.
Sure.
Is if you can tell a bunch of stories about how it feels good to spend money, right? Like I love writing a big check to the guy that washes my car.
Right.
I love, and if you don't enjoy paying people, then you're. You know, that's the reason why you're going to have trouble, right? And so then by the time the sale gets there, you've already put yourself into the state that I feel like buying.
Exactly.
I feel like spending money. I feel like spending money.
Yep.
And so the principle works